Hello, students. You are welcome to GST 112, Logic and Philosophy class. This is the first study session for this course. So before we begin this course, I would like to take you through what you are expected to know, or the study sessions that we will be covering in the course of taking this course. The first study session will be talking about the nature and the subject matter of philosophy, where we are going to give a definition by various philosophers and their attempt to define a philosophy. And we'll come to a point where we'll give a general definition for philosophy. We'll move to the second study session, which will talk about epistemology. That is a theory of knowledge, sources of knowledge, how we can differentiate knowledge from faith, from belief, from opinions. So we'll move to the third study session, which will talk about metaphysics. Then we'll move to the last study session, which is study session 4, where we'll be discussing the meaning of fallacy, its categories, and we are going to look at some examples for you to better understand the word fallacy. Now, let us move to the first study session. When you have studied this session, after you have watched this video, you should be able to identify and discuss the controversies that surround various attempts by different philosophers to define philosophy. The second learning outcome there is that you should be able to provide possible definition and conception of philosophy from the ancient through to the contemporary period where we are now. What is philosophy? Now, in the past, taking this course, I've asked students to define what they understand by philosophy. And students have gave different answers. Some of them say philosophy is how a person thinks. Another person says different people's view of life or death and what happened after they have died. That is what philosophy is. Another person said philosophy is in-depth reasoning about literary work. Some even gave funny answers. He said philosophy is a bunch of crap that people do when they want to make money, but they don't want to work. That's another definition that a student gave. Now, if we now look critically into this course, there are some people that we call philosophers. Examples of these philosophers are Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Ludwig, Bertrand, and so on and so forth. These people also gave their definition of philosophy. Let me give you some of their definition. According to Socrates, they define philosophy as an academic subject that exercises reason and logic in an attempt to understand reality and answer fundamental questions about knowledge, about life, about morality, about virtue, and about human nature. Socrates' philosophy can be seen as a form of ethical inquiry that seeks to understand the nature of wisdom and virtue. And he gave that definition so that it can guide individual on the path to living a good life through self-examination and dialogue. Now, let us look at Ludwig's definition of philosophy. He said philosophy is not a theory, neither is it a doctrine, but rather he considered philosophy as an activity He said it is an activity of clarification of thoughts, and more so of critique of language. Now, according to Ludwig, the purpose of philosophy is not to uncover grand metaphysical truths, but rather he gave that definition that philosophy is to clarify the ways in which we use language and to eliminate confusion and misunderstanding that may arise as a result of such language misuse. He argued that the meaning of a word or concept, it depends on the context in which that word is being used. And it is impossible to understand language and concepts in isolation from their use in a particular context. Now, if you consider what Ludwig is saying, this is particular to those that studied law. You know, when you are in a court of law, we are not very careful. They can use what you have said even to manipulate you. Now, let us consider Russell's definition of philosophy. Russell, in his own definition, said philosophy is the science of the possible. This statement intended by him to sum up two distinctive characteristics of any philosophical proposition. Let me give you a clarity on what it is saying. He said, a statement must be general and it must be a priori. That is, you must be able to explain it through reasoning. Russell believed that philosophy should be grounded in reason and evidence, and that it should strive to be logical, it should be clear, and it should be precise. He argued that philosophical thinking should be guided by a commitment to critical thinking and the scientific methods. Now, it should be guided by commitment to critical thinking and the scientific method, and that it should be open to new ideas and perspective. Now, what he's saying is that when you give a proposition, you must be able to explain it, and it must be readily acceptable. That is, it must be obvious for everybody to see. He now said you must not compartmentalize that knowledge. You must be open to new ideas and perspective. Now, in overall, Russell's definition of philosophy emphasizes its role as a broad and inclusive discipline that seeks to understand the world in general and our place in it by examining fundamental questions about reality, about knowledge, about value, and by using reason and evidence to arrive at a well-supported conclusion. So that is Russell's perspective. Now, etymologically, philosophy has been traced back to two Greek words. The first one is philo, and the second one there is Sophia, which means love and wisdom. Now, from this interpretation, we can simply define philosophy as love for wisdom. Now, from this, you can see that it is wrong to say that philosophy is wisdom, but rather is a constant and persistent search for wisdom. This search for wisdom presupposes a critical thinking attitude, which means in our quest for searching for wisdom, we should think critically about what we are saying, and it must be acceptable. Now, philosophy has also been defined as a no man's land between science and theology. What does this mean? It means that as much as philosophy can be related to science and theology, it also differs from science and theology. Now, let us have a deeper understanding of this. How does philosophy relate to science? How does philosophy relate to theology? Likewise, how do they differ? Philosophy is like science because it engages in critical thinking and understanding of the world. And it differs from it because science uses empirical examination and experimentation to study the world. Philosophy is like science because it engages in critical thinking. Philosophy is like science because it engages in critical thinking and understanding of the world. Likewise, it differs from science because science uses empirical examination and experimentation to study the world. You know, when there is a proposition in science, you must be able to do an experimentation or undergo experimental procedure in order to explain the theory behind such. Likewise, philosophy. I say philosophy is like science because it engages in critical thinking and understanding of the world. Because philosophy tries to reason things out. Likewise, science also reason things out. But where the distinction came in is that when science has reasoned about such things, they will try to use experimental procedure to explain or to back that theory. Philosophy can be satisfied with just reasoning. That is where the difference is. You might not necessarily be able to use experimental procedure or empirical examination to explain theory behind philosophy, but it's not like that in science. Now, how does it relate to theology? It relates to theology because it inquires into world beyond sense and experience. So theology also, it relates into what's beyond sense and experience. Theologians, they know that there is something that sense or experience might not also be able to explain. How does it differ from theology? It differs from theology because theology relies on faith and is mainly concerned with the world that is beyond sense and experience. And that is not like philosophy. Now, likewise, philosophy is also defined as a gadfly because it is a discipline that keeps human beings always on their toes in respect of received opinion. Now, if you now consider all these definition from Socrates, from Ludwig, from Russell, etymological definition, and even definition in comparison to science and theology, you can see that each of these definitions, they are interesting in their own way because they are applicable to what the author is trying to focus on. And to some degree, they capture some of what philosophy is about, or at least what people are thinking it is about. Now, what we can glean from all this definition is that philosophy is a kind of conversation about important questions, much of which is focused on human existence. much of which is focused on human existence. Now, if you will agree with me, we can therefore conclude from all these definitions given that philosophy is critical inquiry into nature of things. Critical inquiry into nature of things. Now we'll be moving to different conceptions of philosophy. Going by the fact that there is no univocal definition of philosophy, attempts are made by scholars to capture definition by classification. Now, what do we mean? They try to classify the different ways of doing philosophy under some conception. For instance, there can be Socrates' conception of philosophy, there can be philosophy as contemplation, there can be philosophy as analysis, and there can be philosophy as unity of theory and practice. Now, let me explain this one after the other. The first one there is Socratic conception of philosophy. Now, according to this philosophy, philosophy should be critical and philosopher must live by example. They must be moral exemplaries and be ready to stand by the truth and should not be dogmatic. And this conception is usually associated with Socrates and Plato. So what they are saying is that every philosopher must be a good example of standing by the truth, what they have tested and they have seen that is the truth. They should stand by it. The second conception there says philosophy as contemplation. This one says philosophical question and answer, they are open-ended. And philosophers are citizens of the universe. They are versatile in knowledge of the world and do not believe in compartmentalization of knowledge. What do they mean when they say philosophical questions are open-ended? What it means is that as you are asking a question, it is leading to another question. As you are asking a question, it is leading to another question. They are open to ideas. They believe that when there is a light, you will know more. They believe that there can be an improvement on the level of their knowledge as at present. And these concepts is usually associated with Russell. You can refer to the definition we gave earlier on so that you can relate it together. The next one, they say philosophy as analysis. From this concept, it says philosophers should be contented with linguistic clarification and conceptual analysis, which means when you have given a proposition and you are able to explain it and clarify it, and you are able to give a conceptual analysis to back that proposition up, he said, you should be okay. The last one there is philosophy as unity of theory and practice. So philosophy can be seen as a way of uniting theory and practice to enable us make the world a better place than it is presently. That is what philosophy as unity of theory and practice is saying. All right. Having considered these conceptions, we could say that philosophy has four major branches. That is, four major disciplines that it focuses on. The first one there is epistemology. Epistemology is philosophical study of knowledge, which answers the following question. Questions like, what is knowledge? Can we have knowledge? If we can have it, how can we get it? These are kind of questions that the study of epistemology try to answer. The next one there is metaphysics. It's a philosophical study of reality, and it answers the question pertaining to actual existence of things, nature of things, and even it inquires into nature of God. That is when we are talking about philosophy of religion. That is what metaphysics captures. The next one there is ethics. Ethics is philosophical study of morality, and it answers this question: what makes an action right or wrong? Is morality relative? What does the word right and the word wrong, what do they actually mean? These are some of the things that the study of ethics tried to clarify. And the last one there is logic, which is philosophical study of reason and argument. And it answers questions such as what is knowledge, what is argument, what makes an argument work, and what makes an argument fail. It's tried to consider the premise of an argument and the conclusion of that argument. We'll be dwelling much of this on logic when we are doing fallacy in study session 4. We have come to the end of this study session, and I believe we have had an interacting discussion. We will continue our discussion next week, same time. Please take time to go through your study material so that you can have in-depth understanding on what we have discussed today. Do have a wonderful day. Thank you for your time.